Now, let's get to Tim Geithner's new plan for toxic assets. This is the plan that he was going to unveil on Monday, and he did. That is going to supposedly address the core of the problem. I'm not sure it's the core of the problem at all, but that's a different discussion. First, let's discuss whether the plan makes any sense at all. First thing they did was they changed the name. You know that plans got issues when all of a sudden they start tinkering with the names. It's not toxic assets anymore because that sounds bad. We don't want the taxpayer getting stuck with toxic assets. It's now legacy assets. So that sounds much more pleasant, doesn't it? Don't you want to buy some legacy assets? Nobody wants to buy toxic assets, but legacy assets, that sounds fun and profitable. All right, so we've got that cosmetic change. Now, what's the heart of it? The heart of it is, unfortunately, very similar to Hank Paulson's plan under the Bush administration, which is somehow take the crap within the banks and unload them on the American taxpayer. Now, why would they do this? Right? As I wonder over and over. Because they say, no, you don't understand, credit is frozen, and the way to get it unfrozen is to get these banks financially healthy again. And it's not a problem because these toxic assets, legacy assets, are not so bad anyway. They're just undervalued right now. And since they're undervalued, that's freezing up the credit situation at the banks, and then that's why they're not lending out more money. And that if we could just get these banks healthy again, everything will be fine. Well, I couldn't disagree more. One, the problem isn't that the banks aren't healthy enough. The problem is that banks ran amok based on bad ideas that they have not been disabused of. And that if given their druthers, they would go back and do the same exact things if you don't regulate them. So do I want these banks to be healthy? But that's not my goal. You keep saying the ultimate goal is to make sure that lending happens. But President Obama said on the Leno program that apparently you're going to have all sorts of new plans to get lending outside of the banks, whether it's for small businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So why are we helping these banks unload their worst assets onto the American taxpayer? It doesn't make any sense. Now, they have a new system for doing it, so they say, don't worry, we're going to get the best bang on our buck. What we're going to do is we're going to guarantee, instead of just buying them or just taking them, right, and then trying to sell them on our own as the government, what we're going to do is we're going to do an auction. And we're going to let the market set the price. Well, you say, all right, to me, that sounds a little logical, right? But the problem with that is the market has already set the price, and the price sucks. And so that's why the banks don't want to sell them. Because they could. Today, if the banks wanted, they could sell all their toxic assets. But they don't want to get, pennies on the dollar, right? But that's what the market judges that they're worth now. So how are they going to artificially inflate those prices so the banks would be willing to sell their crap? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to put up half the money that they need for a deposit for the private investors who might buy these, and then we're going to insure all of the money. It sounds complicated, but in the end, what winds up happening is the American taxpayer guarantees 97% of that money. So they bring in a private investor to buy it, and he doesn't care. He'll bet it up a little bit because the American taxpayer is paying the bill on it ultimately. So let's say that you got $100 worth of assets, to keep it simple, and right now the private market values it at about $30. And the bank doesn't want to sell it at $30 because then they're going to have a $70 loss and go under, right? So in this competitive bidding, it might get bid up to $60 or $80. Why? Because the private investor thinks all I got to do is put in $2, and then the government's going to take care of the rest, basically. So if it goes under, I lost $2. I can live with that. But if it turns out I buy it at 60 and it's worth 85, then I just made a killing. So the entire upside is for the private investors. The entire downside, well, 97% of the downside, is for us, the taxpayer. Now, does that plan sound like a good idea to you? Well, to me, it doesn't sound like that good an idea. It didn't sound like a very good idea to Paul Krugman and to many other economists who looked at it. Krugman had some very choice words on it. Artificially trying to protect these banks have nothing to do with our ultimate objective. Artificially trying to protect these banks have everything to do with protecting these banks. Geithner is still in the Wall Street bubble. I was hoping that this plan would be different, but it isn't. It's the same old plan, and it's meant not to protect you. It's meant to protect the guys on Wall Street and the guys who run these companies and these particular companies. We don't need Citigroup to survive. We don't need Bank of America or AIG or any of these companies to survive. Will their assets, if they go into bankruptcy, do their assets magically disappear and then thereby causing a global meltdown? No, the assets are still there. We sell them off. No, look, don't get me wrong. I'm not being naive. Are there downsides to what I'm saying? Absolutely. Will we take a hit if we do this? Again, absolutely. But we're going to take the hit no matter what. All we're doing is throwing good money after bad. And the people who do get it, they say this: the real problem isn't even the toxic assets. The real problem is the bets they made on top of the toxic assets. Okay? And in this case, what it is they made bets. And so the underlying asset is, let's say, is $100, right? But they made $1 million worth of bets on it. And one of the articles that I read in The Economist tells you who won one of those bets. It's a guy named John Paulson. And there's nothing wrong. He's a smart guy. He made the right bets. He didn't do anything wrong, okay? And now he's incredibly wealthy for it. He made over $1 billion, I think, on the Lehman Brothers bet alone, right? And on the one hand, I want to say more power to him, right? He didn't take taxpayer money, et cetera, et cetera. He made the right bets on these things, right? But on the other hand, why are we all going to pay him off? They're just goddamn bets. So, as Elliot Spitzer pointed out, there's some chance that we shouldn't even pay these bets. That all we're doing is taking taxpayer money to pay off other hedge funds that made the right bets. Now, do you think that's a good investment of taxpayer money? And that this toxic asset stuff is nickel and dime based because it's only a small percentage of the real problem, which is the derivative bets. And that the money we give to AIG, which they earlier had been unaccountable and is now barely accountable, and the money we give to all these other companies, they're funneling over to pay these bets off. The reason they don't want to tell us is because it's absurd. Now, if the taxpayer really knew that we are basically paying their gambling debts for these guys, you know how enraged they'd be? That's why they want to keep it secret. And it's only barely trickling out. So keeping these companies alive so they can pay off the Goldman Sachs and the other companies that made these bets is insanity. And is the Geithner approach right? Look, the one part about it I like, and it's a small, maybe silver lining in this dark, dark cloud, but is that at least there's some sort of auction so that you get to some valuation. Of course, that valuation, as I explained earlier, is grossly inflated because the American taxpayer is guaranteeing 97% of it. But so I like that part of it a little bit better than simply just taking all the toxic assets. But overall, it is not the right plan. And unfortunately, the American people are being too kind to Obama.